Getting the band back together, and that's what I get for having to turn my sound effects off whenever I have a work meeting during the week. Welcome to Iceman and Coach, everybody. It's the Iceman, Matt Freites, and that is the coach, Brad Powell. Brad, for the first time this month, what's up, buddy?
Iceman, that music, buddy, like it just like triggers something in me to hear the Iceman and Coach theme. It's been a while, like you said. We've got a whole month under our belts here of like no show, right? We did sneak a Braves talk in at one point, but that was it. And glad to be back at it. There's a ton of stuff to talk about between obviously the outcome of the NCAA tournament, the coaching carousel, the women's NCAA tournament, the Masters, the NFL draft is happening right now with the first round. Happened Thursday. Then you hopped on with Dave and Cleve from Political Football, which was I tuned in for most of it. That was fun. Yeah, and I got to say, though, man, you mentioned turning off your sound effects. I think it would be tremendous if you entered your work meetings to the I&C theme song. That would be wonderful.
I know. It threw me off, though, because in my headphones, I didn't hear anything. And when I looked out, it was muted and the volume was down. Because I do that just to make sure that I don't accidentally trigger something. Because that would be what would happen, is I would have some important meeting, which I don't have a lot of them these days, and I would hit the sound effect. But I have used the board at a work meeting to actually use sound effects for like when we did virtual parties and stuff like that. So it has happened before. But you're awesome. Right. I know, right? A lot of stuff has happened, but I do want to talk about one thing before we get into the sports thing. So last year you did softball coach, or you were a softball coach for Riley's team. And this year I am a t-ball coach for
Heck yeah, man.
For Nostra James's team. And we haven't had a chance to talk about it yet because we just haven't had a show this month. And it's been quite an experience, I will tell you. I love the joy that the kids get from doing well at this age. And I was very hesitant to even coach at all because I'm not necessarily an extrovert to the point of wanting to talk to parents and stuff like that. But so far, it has been really, really awesome. The kids that I got, which were completely randomly chosen, have been terrific. And they've really picked up on what I've been putting down, which either is a testament to just being lucky or I actually know what I'm doing.
Well, half the battle with that age group is just keeping them like engaged in what's happening, which is a tall task in itself.
You have no idea.
And if you could manage to teach them a couple things along the way, man, like you are far and above what most people accomplish at that level in any sport. And T-ball is unique because you got to think like every other sport, even at the lowest levels, like you're still playing like the sport itself, just maybe on a smaller field or where T-ball, it's different, right? I mean, it has to be because these guys aren't going to be able to hit like actual pitched balls, even from an adult most of the time. So it is weird because it's like, how much time do you want to spend? Like, I mean, you want to teach them how to hit the ball off the tee just so they can have success, but like, it's like one of those weird things where I don't know. It's just like, it's different. Like they're going to do this for 1 or 2 years and then they'll move on to like real baseball or, some degree of it. So it is unique.
Well, it's also interesting because at this age, the parents are trying to get an understanding of what their kids are into. Now, not all parents are like that because there are some parents who want their kid to get into a sport because they played it or whatever. But a lot of the kids here have, or at least the parents have told me that they didn't like baseball or t-ball until I came around. And so that's been a really fun part of the job. And I even posted on Facebook that one of the kids made me an art project at school, which is just fascinating because it's like, wow, after 2 games, I've already made enough of an impact to where that little girl thought of me between Saturday's game and Wednesday's practice. And I thought that was awesome. That part actually does give me a lot of the feels and it makes me happy. And to know that all the kids have really awesome parents too is pretty terrific. Like all of them are just like, we're super satisfied with how the kids are doing. I mean, Brad, they've picked up on something every single week and employed it in a game, which is just tremendous. And not to sound like Trump, but tremendous at that age.
No, absolutely. And those of all the years that I coached at different sports, at different age groups, those little moments like the art project, those things always meant more to me than any win or anything like that ever occurred because that's when, as you said, that you've made an impact, that you have made an impression on that child that has, it's lasting in some way. And then maybe it lasts a week, maybe it lasts a month. And in some cases, if you're lucky, as they get older, it lasts a lifetime. So it's that's what makes this stuff worth it. And that's why people, despite the crazy parents and some of the negative stuff that comes along with coaching youth sports, even high school sports and beyond, that's why people still do it, is because the rewards are tremendous. And yes, like you are providing, coaching is selfless in a lot of ways, but at the same time I think it's okay to say it's self-serving, because it is very gratifying when, like I said, you have a moment like that with the art project, or as you stated, when you're teaching different techniques or drills and they pick up on it and they retain it, and then you see them put that into practice in a game and beyond. I mean, those are the reasons why we all do it. And it's awesome to hear that you're getting to experience these things.
Yes, and we will have a game today, hopefully, if the weather cooperates out here, because we're doing this in the early morning for me, almost noon at this point. And so this is not a usual time for us. So later today, hopefully, I'll be able to see the kids employ what I call scooping the ball when it comes to them. I got them to stop the ball when it comes to them. Now we're scooping and throwing to first base, and they've been really picking up on it. But you brought up the idea of making a difference as a coach. And I never considered for myself that I'd be able to make a difference in one of these kids' lives. But I know that for me, that's very meaningful to think about that. And even if it's only a fleeting moment, but coaching, as you said, in general, is selfless. But I kind of wonder with this next story if it's actually selfish in a lot of ways, because one of the stories that has been, I think, the biggest story this month was John Calipari, who we talked about, I think, right before we left for Charlotte, or maybe right after we came back from Charlotte, about John Calipari and whether maybe it was time for him to move on. And even though he had a lifetime contract, we thought, well, that maybe will come to fruition at some point, depending on what happens in future years. And little did we know that 2 weeks later it was going to happen, and he was going to be the one to instigate that change. And he left the University of Kentucky for the University of Arkansas. That was a big shock for me. I don't know how you took that.
I can't say I'm incredibly surprised that he left. I mean, yeah, it's tough to walk away from a lifetime contract, but I think that this is one of those deals where, in the end, I think both the University of Kentucky and John Calipari are coming out better, because it's just one of those deals where it wasn't like it was completely in the gutter, but obviously he wasn't performing up to the Kentucky standard. I think that their fans are crazy and delusional. It's absolutely nuts. And I got to experience some of that listening to a couple of X Spaces and podcasts where they had some fans come on and participate. Like, as these transactions, these coaching moves were happening, like in real time, like this is going on. And I'm listening to these fans after they realized Cal's going, and like they had nothing but negative things to say about him and his time at Kentucky, which, whatever. Okay. I mean, for me, it's like, as a mid-major basketball fan, I'm sitting there like, come on, man. Like, you're like complaining about like getting your $1 million in 20s instead of hundreds. Like, that's what, it just seems like those are like first world problems. But they're sitting there like they were talking about who they were going to hire. And there was all this conversation about, Danny Hurley and, Billy Donovan, and obviously Patino's name was thrown in there and others. And they're like, you know what? Like, we'll get whoever we want. Like, that was their mentality, is whoever we want anybody would be willing to come here, like whoever it is we want, we're going to get them. And like, obviously I think they ended up down to like their fourth choice. But we'll circle back to that in a second. But him going to Arkansas, it's funny because I think that their dysfunction actually led to them kind of hitting a home run in this case, because I feel like, the Tyson family, like Tyson Chicken, like they're located, in the Northwest Arkansas area. Obviously the Walton family with Walmart, there's a lot of money in Northwest Arkansas near Fayetteville. And I think they sat back and they were watching this coaching search and being like, what is going on? And they decided, you know what, like the kind of the power brokers, the money, decided they were going to get involved. And at that point in time, because how much of a shit show it was, they came in and they fronted whatever was needed to go get John Calipari. So you had a guy that was looking to get out of probably a situation where he'd overstayed his welcome. You have a university that's, would just starving to have a nationally relevant program. And Arkansas hasn't been bad. I mean, they haven't been like terrible by any means, but to have a coach that's going to come and take them, to Final Fours and things like that, they had the money and it just kind of worked out. It was sort of the perfect situation. I think, like I said, I think all three parties, Arkansas, John Calipari, and Kentucky, all ultimately got what they wanted when it's all said and done, because Kentucky's not stuck with Cal anymore, who they were unhappy with. Cal's not stuck with Kentucky anymore, who he was unhappy with. He's getting his money. He's getting a fresh start. Arkansas is getting a great coach, and they all win.
This brings up a bunch of things for me. First of all, this is the second time we've been talking in this fashion about a coach taking a job or not taking a job, because at the beginning of this year, we talked about Alabama. Nick Saban inexplicably retired at the time, and you said that Kalen DeBoer was probably their fifth choice because a bunch of the other coaches that they reached out to said, I'm good. And that's a job that you and I both agreed anybody would want. But it's about timing. It's about when or who you're taking over for. And say what you want about Coach Cal. He was successful there. They won national championships there. So maybe the most recent, what have you done for me lately, look at his tenure there was disappointing because of first run exits or early exits. But national championships is the standard at Kentucky. And they did that. And I think they did that at least once, maybe not twice. I can't exactly remember. Somebody will correct me on that at some point. But my point is there was a level of success that just about any program would take. And Arkansas had won a national championship back in the mid-90s. I think it was like 94 that they won it. And so it had been a while. And they're a school where the landscape of college sports has changed so much that you need to make a move. And this is really, to me, a message to any school out there is put the money together and you can buy yourself a championship level coach. And Coach Cal going there now, he's got to feel really good. Number one, he's getting paid a lot, which probably isn't a big deal to him at this point because he's made a ton of money coaching. But there are really no expectations. Like, I don't think that the fan base is like national championship or bust, because this reminds me of Steve Spurrier going from Florida to South Carolina. South Carolina hadn't really done a whole lot. And just by having him there, they were elevated. And that was great for them. They never could get over the hump of beating the best teams in the country, but they haven't done a whole lot since. And so I think this is kind of, it makes me feel so many things because it's similar to so many different situations. But I think at the end of the day, you find out, just throw money at a coach and you're probably going to be able to get him.
And I think there's something to be said for being a basketball coach at a football school. You're not the highest profile sport on campus. Where at Kentucky, that's not the case. Now, yes, Mark Stoops, the football coach, he's done a great job at Kentucky, and they've been very relevant the last several years. But they're still not the number one show in town in Lexington, man. That's the basketball program. Yeah, not even in the in the same stratosphere. So I do think that that's nice because you can, for lack of a better term, fly under the radar a little bit, maybe if you're Cal, because the bar just isn't as high, and everybody's wrapped up in Arkansas football. And if the basketball team can be highly successful, that's just a bonus, right? That's just the cherry on top. So I think that's really exciting. And also, we talked about coaches maybe not willing to move, and some of these, high profile programs having to go down to second, third, fourth choices. I feel like the NIL climate may have a lot to do with that, because with NIL, I can only assume that you get a lot of these, I don't know if you want to call them handlers, whatever, the bagmen, the people with the money. I have to imagine at certain places that those people want to have a lot of say in where that money's going and who it's going to. And I think that if you're somewhere where you've got that good relationship with those people and you've got everything you need from a resource standpoint, facilities, to put a successful team on the field. And, the job that comes to mind to me when we're talking about this, like Ole Miss, right? Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, like, Ole Miss is far from like the sisters of the poor, I mean, they've got a well-established program in the SEC, and they're the type of program that with a couple, with a good recruiting class, like they could make a run, especially with the 12-team playoff, like they could get themselves into the playoff every few years and have a chance to make a run to get to a national championship game. They're not going to be probably in contention yearly, but I think that if you're Lane Kiffin, you look around, you're like, I got a pretty good gig here. Because if I go to Alabama and in 3 years we haven't won a national championship, I'm going to get crucified, So, and I have the relationships with the people here. We got a good thing going. I'm comfortable. My family likes it. We're happy. We're winning. And I think more coaches are content to like just be good with that.
Yeah, and so much of it has to do with situation. I mean, who wants to take over after Nick Saban? Who wants to take over after Coach Cal, right? It's because there's a bar that has been set that is so difficult to match when you're going after somebody. And again, like I said, I understand that they've had first round exits, but a national championship was won in the 10 years since Coach Cal got to Kentucky. And so whoever follows them, which turns out to be Mark Pope from BYU, has to meet that standard. And it's a tough ask. And I think it depends on where you are, the situation. Like when they talked about Dan Hurley and Kentucky said they were going to throw whatever money at him. In my opinion, I'm like, why would he leave? Not only is it a bad fit, I think culturally, just in terms of like how he coaches, but you're coming off 2 national championships with Connecticut. The NIL people there are just going to continue to give you what you need to continue that dynasty. Why would you leave? Why would you leave that? Or if you're at a school that has very similar resources and you know that you could continue to get in players and be able to recruit without all of the expectations that come with the fandom and everything that comes with Kentucky, I think that coaches have thought this way differently now. And I think it's awesome to me that these coaches are being like, thanks, but no thanks.
No, I think so too. And in the Kentucky situation, they certainly didn't make the biggest like splash hire they could have made, but when it's all said and done, they may have made the best hire for them. And that's what I mean, it's yet to be seen, but I think that when it comes down to it, man, it's about things like fit, like you mentioned. I mean, he's a Kentucky alum. He played on a national championship team.
Which I didn't know, by the
Uh,
way. Like, I
yeah,
did not realize that. And so that shows my ignorance that when I saw the hire, I was like, huh? And it turns out it probably was a good fit from that perspective because he's been embedded there.
yeah. I mean, we talk. I've kind of made reference to these crazy Kentucky fans, but like, I mean, he's one of them. I mean, he is one of them, and I think that that's kind of what you need. Cal was almost, even if it was as long as he was there, he was always sort of an outsider. I feel like just because of his personality, where he's from. He doesn't look like Kentucky. You know what I mean? Like you don't get that feel. He's more of a Northeast, like like I don't know. I think like a stockbroker looking guy. Wall Street.
He's a
That's what.
CEO type.
Yeah, and um, I think that he was always still sort of an outsider while he was there, and I think in this case they got a really good fit. Who knows the lay of the land in Lexington, and they now just what's left is to put a team together and go win basketball games, right? Piece of cake.
Yeah, piece of cake in today's NIL world. But they're Kentucky. They should be able to recruit on the name of Kentucky because I do think that it's still a desirable place to land in the college basketball landscape. Because I don't think that college basketball is the same as football, where I think the location geographically matters as much for some of these players. I mean, because I just don't think that it matters because of when it's played and how it's played. It's indoors. Like there's a lot of different things. And I think
Right,
that when,
exactly.
you know what I mean? There's a lot more
Yep.
factors there. And also there's a lot less players too. So you can make more of an impact going somewhere. And I think that's just, I think
Yeah.
that's the changing of it.
Yeah, if the weather mattered in basketball, Gonzaga would be terrible.
Right. Or anywhere
Right.
that's super, super cold. Like all those mid-major teams that are in the Midwest where it's like super free, like people wouldn't go there, but it doesn't really matter. And I don't think that, I mean, maybe it does to an extent, but like your social life, because you're focusing so much on basketball, really matters in that way too. There's not as much exposure as there is for college football players, where you're a college football player, you could be in commercials. Not saying you can't for basketball. It's just not as common, in my
Right.
opinion, is all.
No, I agree. Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, and you said it's played indoors. That's a big factor. I think more so maybe like from a social perspective, it's the social life, the city itself, or things like that, that have more of an impact than the weather. But I do think the weather's very relevant in the world of college football.
I do too. And we mentioned Dan Hurley. So UConn wins the national championship again in very dominant fashion. They didn't look like they really, I mean, Purdue gave them a little bit of a run in that game, but their run through the national championship, through the NCAA tournament, was pretty much a revenge tour for a team that was defending their national championship, which is just funny to me. But Dan Hurley has created a dynasty, a juggernaut. Who knows how long it will last? He's looking to make it a dynasty. On the other side of that, though, you had Purdue. And Zach Edey is a guy that I've noticed got a lot of hate on the internet for, I guess, how he played, how he was officiated. And from all accounts, in my opinion, he seems like he's a pretty decent guy and played the game, played very hard, trained really hard. And he got a lot of hate. And I didn't think it was warranted, but a lot of people are asking now, like, what does he look like in the NBA? And he's, what, 7'4", super lanky. I think he will have a fit in the NBA, but I just don't think that his playing style and the way that the NBA is built with all these players being big, like I'm talking about like muscular, I'm not sure how he fits in, but he's a good player, and I don't think he deserved the hate that he got.
Yeah, I feel like in the NBA these days, granted there are some guys that resemble traditional big men, but I feel like everybody is like a, whether you're the point guard or you're the, technically the five man, like everybody has to play the game like a wing. Everybody's got to be able to shoot the three. Everybody's got to be able to handle the basketball. Everybody's got to be able to create their own shot and get to the rim when need be. And I just, there's a lot of things on that list I just named that don't seem to be a part of his game. As far as how he was officiated, I didn't watch a lot of Purdue games. Honestly, I don't know if I watched an entire game outside of maybe the two games in the Final Four for them. But you mentioned it, UConn they were head and shoulders better than everybody else they played. It wasn't even close.
No.
And I really didn't expect that, honestly. And you just talk about a master class in coaching and motivation from Danny Hurley. I mean, I don't know if you heard about the transportation debacle for them when they were supposed to go out to the Final Four. Like they arrived like a solid like 24 hours at least later than every other team because they had plane issues and everything else. And then, they're crossing like 3 time zones to get there. And so, of course, all of the mainstream national networks are getting sleep doctors on and everything else to talk about the impact of their bodies adapting and having to cross time zones and all that stuff. And I guarantee you that he loves that stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if he engineered it to be that way so he could use it as motivation. I absolutely love it. I'm all about, I mean, it's some people probably think it's petty or whatever, but that's just a thing about great coaches. Great coaches know how to motivate their team, and by whatever means necessary, they know what buttons to push and win. And when that happens, man, you see the results right there in the way that UConn played throughout the entire tournament. And I remember they kept playing that clip throughout the tournament. Earlier in the year, UConn got beat by somebody. I don't even know who it was, and in the post-game press conference, Danny Hurley's like, you better get us now. You know what I mean? Because later this isn't going to happen.
Well, and you recruit players that buy into that mentality, that share that mentality. And that shows a good coach, not just in coaching and motivating, but recruiting too. Because for the last 3 seasons or however long he's been there building this team, this has been a group of players who buy into this. So if it was engineered, they're totally all about it. And they love his grittiness. And I do too. Because I think that not every coach should be the same. I know that when people watch these coaches, they think that they should be a certain way in order to do business. And you can be who you are, be authentic as a coach, and as long as you're recruiting players who are going to respond to that. Brian Wardle does that at Bradley. I think you get players. It's why he goes international a lot of times, because he knows they can coach them hard. They're going to respond at least most of the time. And that's what you have to do in today's landscape. And I think he does a fantastic job of it. And I love, personally, the idea of a defending national champion or a defending champion in whatever sport it is that you play, coming out and acting like they are an underdog and playing with a chip on their shoulder as if they're out for revenge, even though they're the ones who everybody's trying to knock off. And I loved watching them play. And they played some good teams. Let's not forget that they beat Alabama, who was the highest scoring team by far, wasn't even close. Like, not even, right. They were like swatting a gnat away. And that's
like some mentality. Bill Belichick shit, man.
It kind of is, right? With a little bit more, I think, understanding of how today's players work. And that, again, is a testament to how you adapt to today's landscape. And a lot of coaches can't do that. Like Coach Cal's getting paid a lot to go to Arkansas, but can he do that, right? Can he relate to new players today? The other night on the feed for the draft, we talked about Tom Izzo. And I actually said to you, I think in Charlotte, like he's kind of nearing that point of he may need to get out while the getting has been good already, because maybe he's not game for the way the system is today. You need a little bit more forward-thinking coach. It doesn't matter how they coach, but again, it's how you motivate and how you do a lot of things. But I just want to go back to one thing, because I know that you talking about Kentucky and talking about expectations, and I said, why would Dan Hurley leave that? And you thought that Kentucky's not really a desirable job because of all the things that it comes with. Now, I wanted to give you a school that I think is kind of in the same boat that still thinks it's relevant. I think Kentucky's relevant, but is relevant. And I think that getting that coaching gig matters to a lot of people who are pure blood college basketball people, but I don't think it matters. And that's Indiana University.
Yeah, man, that's a good one. I was sitting there trying to think in my head like where you were going to go with this, like what because one name that popped into my head. This isn't quite on the level of Indiana, obviously, but a team that a once proud program that's really fallen from grace. I was thinking like Georgetown, someone like that. But Indiana for sure has just fallen off. They're like Nebraska in football, very very similar to Nebraska in football. They went on a great run with a legendary coach, won a lot of games, won championships. Indiana is the basketball capital of the world, maybe.
That's why I bring it up, because of that.
And they just have not found a way to, I guess, recapture the success of the past. And I don't know if it's a matter. I mean, you might miss on a coach, but what are they on? Since Bob Knight left.
That's
like
the thing, though. It doesn't matter.
Seventh. I mean, it doesn't matter what coach they brought. You can't tell me every hire they've made has been absolutely terrible.
Nope. Tom Crean, was Crean the coach there for a while? I mean, and they were somewhat successful, but I'm talking about, like, I think that Indiana has been viewed for a long time, and Purdue's kind of in that realm, not the same, but like Purdue being relevant. You think about how long it had been since they'd been to a Final Four, and again, a Midwest school that kind of has a basketball pedigree, who had a sustained level of success when like Gene Cady was there. It's like they're not necessarily relevant. Like once this team goes away, they're going to go back to somewhere in the middle in the cesspool that everybody else kind of lives in. And Indiana's been there for a while, but like whenever they get a new coach, it's like, oh, the Indiana job. And I'm like, I don't actually think it matters anymore. I think that they're kind of just another level, another program. And I hate to say that, and I don't mean to be disparaging, but they're the child actor that still thinks that they're doing something, and I don't think that they can. And I think that the landscape
Corey Feldman?
Yeah. I mean,
Indiana's Corey Feldman.
But like, you know how we said geography doesn't matter? Winning matters. And if you're a program like Indiana, you can't go around and say, well, we won national championships in the 80s with Bob Knight. Well, Bob Knight's dead now.
Yeah, most of these guys weren't alive then.
No.
Man, the kids you're recruiting.
You got to recruit on the what have you done for me lately. And that's where I think Mark Pope is in a good position, because he played on a national championship team. And hey, this program has won national championships recently. Indiana has not. And I just threw that in there.
Bob Knight would be in prison if he was coaching.
Oh
still
my God. Are
these
you kidding
days.
me?
I mean, and RIP.
Of course.
I mean, he would be in prison for sure.
But I say that because we are going to do Coach's top 5 least desirable jobs in sports. And we're hoping it to be controversial, because if Kentucky is not desirable in your opinion, I can only imagine what else is on that list. So a little bit of a tease for a future episode. Before we move on from March Madness, I want to talk about South Carolina and Caitlin Clark. So Caitlin Clark faces South Carolina. I think it was the highest rated women's basketball game of all time. It broke all these records. I think it was like 18 million viewers, something like that. And South Carolina just better top to bottom. Caitlin Clark did everything she could in that tournament, put all of herself out there, and just couldn't get it done. A lot of people, even commenting on a video that I put out about a month ago, said she's not the greatest because she didn't win a national championship, which is the most ignorant thing I've ever heard. Broke tons of records and is now in the WNBA, and we'll see what kind of an impact she has going forward. But I wanted to ask you about Dawn Staley, because this is a coach now who's coming. People say she's coming up, but it's like, how many national championships has she won now? Undefeated seasons. And I wonder, when all is said and done for her, are we going to be talking about her in the same way that we talk about Pat Summitt, Gino, right? In the pantheon of just college coaches in general.
Yeah, I would say so. She's certainly well on her way. The way that what I saw in that national championship game was basically a very talented team against one person and a supporting cast that didn't do a whole bunch, which was the difference between the semifinal game against LSU and the championship. In the semifinal game, whenever Caitlin Clark was struggling, she did get some help from her teammates. They were able to pick up the slack a little bit. That did not happen in the national championship. She didn't get help from anybody, and they could. And I really apologize. 'Cause I don't know the young lady's name, but the center for South Carolina, they had no answer for her. I don't know how many offensive rebound putbacks I mean, they could not stop her at all. It didn't matter what they did. She was dominant.
Nobody could.
And then to hear that they had, three or four freshmen on that team that were playing meaningful minutes. I mean, so they're going to be back, and they're going to be there for a while, because I don't know that the transfer portal really hits women's college basketball the same way maybe it does men, because likely the reality is there probably isn't the money there at a lot of other places that there is on the men's side.
And winning
Obviously,
matters a lot in
yeah,
college. Like, you want to
yeah,
be at a school like South Carolina because they win.
sure, yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, I think she keeps this thing rolling 100%. She's absolutely going to be in that conversation with Pat Summitt and Gino Auriemma, and
Coach K,
and I
those guys too.
and that's so weird. And I don't. This would be a much longer conversation, but people are so hesitant to group like the Gino Auriemmas of the world, the Pat Summits, with Coach K also, because I think people see it very different, and I could make the argument for it being different, just because I think the talent pool is deeper on the men's side. So you could say it's more of an accomplishment to win because there's more good teams, just because there's more parity, I guess. Where on the women's side, it's very top heavy. The top 10 teams are usually head and shoulders better than. There's a big gap, I would say. At least that's the way it appears to me. Now, I do think that's improving, which is great to see. I think that's improving tremendously, and having what Caitlin Clark did and getting more eyes on women's college basketball is only going to help it moving forward, because now everyone's going to be looking for the next Caitlin Clark, who can be the next media darling and all this. Those things are good. I know that it's bizarre to me that people hate on it so much, because it's great for the sport. It's absolutely great for the sport, and it can only help the WNBA as things move forward with her. But not to stray too far away from Dawn Staley, what she did was tremendous, and she's put a great program together, and they've been consistently really, really good. And to run the table and beat some of the teams that they beat in the tournament the way that they beat them was really impressive.
While there are differences between the men's and women's game fundamentally in certain aspects, coaching is still coaching. And you've got to do the same things that you do day in and day out in order to be consistent. Because if it were as easy as these people are making it, everybody would do it. Not everybody can do it. I mean, look at Iowa. It took Caitlin Clark for them to be on the map. So their coach, whose name I don't remember, and I apologize for that, was not on the map until Caitlin Clark got there and they started breaking records. But Dawn Staley is creating a dynasty. Gino Auriemma, a dynasty. Pat Summitt, same thing. Like, all of these coaches in women's college basketball were creating sustainability. That part is not easy to do. And Coach K winning as many games as he did, Tom Izzo, Bob Knight, Roy Williams, it takes a lot of talent to do that, just in my opinion. And so I agree with you that people are hesitant, but I feel like they shouldn't be hesitant, because at some point we just have to get to the idea of, like, good coaching is good coaching, and I know when I see it, and Dawn Staley is doing it. And the other thing I love about her is she also is very similar to a Dan Hurley type, where she coaches very much with her emotions on her sleeve, but she's also not unwilling to call her players out in a way that is respectful. Like in the semifinal or maybe it was the Elite Eight game when they had to squeak by Oregon State, and her player was like, nobody can guard us. And she said, we blew a 20-point lead tonight. Like, and it was, done respectfully, jokingly, but like being able to do that. I love that when you're able to be like, yeah, maybe you think that, but we also blew a 20-point lead. Like, let's keep that in mind. And that's what keeps her players motivated and hungry. That part of it is not always easy to do for every coach. And like I said, everybody would do it if it was that easy.
And I love to hear those things from a coach, and like you even hear them. And I hear from Brian Wardle all the time on the post game shows of the Bradley games. Yes, you want to win the game, and ultimately at the end of the night, if you got the W, great. It's a lot easier to handle some of the errors that happened when you got the win. But it's never always about, especially throughout the season, it's never always about just the win. Like, these coaches have a standard, and they want to see the game played to that standard, and that's way more important to them than getting the win. Like, yeah, once you get to the postseason, it becomes like just a survive and advance, kind of mode. But they want to see teams playing to their identity and within sort of what the staff has laid out as the bar for the program. And I love seeing that where she's like, hey, like we won. And granted, she said it in the tournament, so that kind of contradicts my point about survive in advance. But she's like, yeah, we won, but we didn't play to our standard, essentially. We didn't. And so I guess, and that goes, a lot of coaches are perfectionists and you're never going to be perfect. But I think seeing the game played the right way in the coach's eyes is a very, 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 very close second to winning. Ultimately, you want to win, but they really care about seeing the game played the right way.
But the Atlanta Falcons. So would you agree with me, and maybe this is bold, but would you agree with me that the Atlanta Falcons are a poorly run organization?
It certainly seems that way, yes.
Does it seem that way? And has it been forever, or do you think it's been more apparent since the 28-3 blown lead in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think Brady and Belichick broke the Falcons.
That is a very popular opinion. And it's not crazy because I think there are moments in a franchise's history that you could consider a seminal moment. A lot of people felt that there were seminal moments when the Patriots lost 18-1 and they continue to come back. And it does take a well-run organization in order to get there. But the Falcons, I feel like, are not. And so last year in the draft, Arthur Smith, who we talked about before, drafts Bijan Robinson at number 8. By the way, this is the third year in a row that they've had the 8th pick, which is a sign that you're poorly run. Yes. And they didn't use him, at least not to what the effectiveness that we would have thought. So here they come, 8th pick this year. Signed Kirk Cousins in the offseason, which I thought was a very good move. Let's go all in on a guy who's probably got a few more prime years left. They gave him $100 million guaranteed for 4 years. And then Roger Goodell reads the pick, and it's Big Penix Energy, Michael Penix Jr. from Washington. I'm not going to lie to you. I tried to justify it in my head, and it is easily one of the most confusing, if not the most confusing pick in first-round NFL draft history.
Yeah, to us casual fans, when you look at it, I think you say, what in the world? Like you just, like I said, the Kirk Cousins piece, and you're bringing this guy in who there was still higher rated quarterbacks on the board too at that point. There's a lot of questions about Michael Penix's health long term. And so I think that alone, those things raise a lot of question marks. I did hear an interesting take from the controversial king himself, Colin Cowherd, and he said something along the lines of, like, he was supporting the choice is what he was doing. And he goes, look at the, Brett Favre wasn't happy when the Packers drafted Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers wasn't happy when they drafted Jordan Love. That seems to be working out okay for that franchise. And if you're the Falcons, you can say, hey, we're in a division that's so bad that we're going to be able to compete for an opportunity to win the division. We've got a veteran quarterback that's won a lot of football games. And that doesn't have a lot of tread left on the tires. And by the way, we probably will have what you could argue it would be the best backup in the league. And I get that, but man, with the number 8 pick though, like that's a lot of money to pay a guy to stand around and watch. And he did also mention though that he thought one of the reasons they took them is because there were he named 3 or 4 franchises that were attempting to get themselves to move up in the draft to take him. There were a lot of people, I guess, that were really, really high on him. It was interesting to hear that. And then, but you mentioned that like they didn't even really talk to the guy, which is also fascinating. I didn't hear that piece. And I don't know if it was on the ESPN broadcast or if you guys said it during the first round on Thursday, but someone said something along the lines of it's a typical case of, we liked the guy until we met him. Like in reference to Kirk Cousins, like, maybe once he showed up, they're like, hey, we're not so sure about this dude. And I see that, what my dad there said, that the owner, apparently Arthur Blank, said he didn't want to see him playing for 5 years. I mean, this is the dumbest move ever then, if that's the case. That's a lot of freaking money to pay a guy to stand on the sideline for 5 years. I mean, that's through his rookie contract. That's through the entire contract. So you're going to basically sign him to a second contract before he takes a meaningful snap and is your starter. And then you better hope that the return on your investment to make it worthwhile is you better win 5 Super Bowls in a row at that point in time.
There are a lot of layers to this. And now I'm not a draft guy whatsoever. So when players or teams make draft picks, I assume that they're doing their homework. And we've heard baffling picks before, busts. Like Jamarcus Russell is probably the biggest bust in NFL history. And we know a lot of different things after the fact or whatever. But like his college career, he was a great quarterback in college. Like he had a big arm and a lot of different things. And when he was drafted, the Raiders needed a quarterback. So you can understand taking a quarterback number one here. But there's a couple things I want to mention. First thing, of course, Colin Cowherd mentioned the Packers. Well, Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers were both the franchise quarterbacks for a sustained amount of years when the team decided to draft a quarterback behind them. So you can understand their hesitancy as those guys, because you don't want to think about your career coming to a close. Tom Brady famously, or I say Giselle famously, got Jimmy Garoppolo traded out of New England because he also didn't want to believe that too. So this situation is a little bit different because you had no quarterback last year and you bring in this guy. Now there's something to be said about wanting to think about the future because the quarterback is older or whatever. But they didn't even talk to Kirk Cousins before they made this pick. That's also really weird too, because you would say, hey, Kirk, look, you're our guy. We're going to build around you. We're going to win now with you. But we also want to look out for the future. I think Kirk would say that makes sense. And yes, of course, if Kirk gets hurt, which is something that could be in the cards no matter what, he would have to worry about possibly getting his job back if Michael Penix comes in and does really great. So there's that. And you mentioned they did not have a meeting with him. I don't believe. I think they met with him for like 30 minutes. Barely saw him work out. He wasn't in their assessed top 30, which is just insane. And then Arthur Blank doesn't want him to start for 5 years. Well, I got a stat for you. So there's only been 2 quarterbacks who have ever made their first professional start at age 25 or older. And I'm going to say these names, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be like, not a one of those guys really blew the doors off the NFL. And that was Brandon Weeden and Chad Pennington. So
wow,
of the 2 of those guys, Pennington was better.
Pennington was solid.
He was solid. But is that really what you're going for with the number 8 pick in the draft?
No. Man, no, it isn't.
No.
It isn't. I was trying to talk myself into it.
You can't.
But no.
No shade on
It's
Chad.
not.
No shade on Chad at all.
Yeah. I mean, because I think that you would, in some cases, you would take consistency over a decade. You would take, playoff football over the course of a decade, I think, in a lot of places. Like Cleveland, the Clevelands of the world. Hell, the Jets would probably be willing to dust off Chad Pennington and send him back out there if it meant a few more wins. That's really interesting. And if it does seem like the public perception based off that video that's floating around is that Arthur Blank was like not in on this pick at all.
Oh, you could tell that. Have you seen the video of the GM trying to explain himself?
Yeah.
That's a guy explaining why he should keep his job. In no way that you can't convince me anything else.
Someone else had texted me about that. What in the world are Falcons doing? And I said, and my initial reaction was, well, they have a meddling owner, and in these cases where you have, they have a meddling owner who likes shiny things. So I really thought this was an owner's pick. I really thought this came from the top until we started seeing some of these other things. Because this was a very Jerry Jones-esque move. So. It doesn't surprise me. And I like Michael Penix more than most people. I was impressed with him when we watched him down the stretch through the college football season. But
he did get exposed against Michigan a little bit, though.
Everybody did.
Yeah, they did. But that's the point, though, is like I think Washington was talented until they met a team that had more probably across the board talent than any other team they'd ever played. And Michigan was far and away the best team in the country this year, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to contradict you there, Dad, with there's going to be good quarterbacks in next year's draft. Because, I mean, and Dave kept mentioning on the show the other night that the draft class, at least right now, the way it looks, that the quarterback draft class coming out next season is not very strong.
Yes.
Which would maybe lead a team to reach a little bit for a guy this year because there is more depth to the class as opposed to holding out until next year. But to contradict what I said about them being in a poor division and having a chance to compete, you would think if you're that close to being able to win your division, and mostly because it's bad, wouldn't you draft a more immediately impactful piece? You'd think if you're that close. I don't know. It's puzzling, man. But watch, Michael Penix he'll be Tom Brady, but the next Tom Brady will be the next Pat Mahomes or something like that. Something crazy.
It's just it's unnerving because we talk about value a lot with the draft, which I think is really an interesting part of especially the first round when you try to think about what you could have spent there, your opportunity cost. And the Falcons now have done 2 really puzzling picks or made 2 puzzling picks at the 8 position the last 2 years. And so it'll be interesting because Michael Penix, the thing about quarterbacks is Kirk Cousins comes in at 35, and Mike, my brother-in-law, always says this, that after the age of 30, they almost become like Jedis because they've seen everything. And so now if they weather that storm, then they can really elevate themselves. And like Matt Stafford is a really good example of that. Like once he got over getting hurt, started to see everything, wins a Super Bowl with a lot of talent around him. Michael Penix, though, is on the older side, and history has told us that when you get a guy that's that old, it takes, like, he's not going to get the time to really develop because he's not going to play right away. And you can't, if you have a win now team, getting a guy like that maybe needs a little bit of time, because like left-handed throwers too, I mean, Tua is obviously really good, but I told you, I feel like, or I think I said it on the feed, his throwing mechanics look a little slow to me. What happens when he's under, heavy pass rush? These pass rushers are so much faster across the board in the NFL. So there's a lot of factors I think that could go into Michael Penix really struggling. But the Falcons they should be in win now mode, and they just pissed off their quarterback. So like it's the strangest thing organizationally. And for the owner to not know, that means that the GM and the coach both made a choice without clearing it with the owner, and that is, oh my goodness, so disastrous.
Do you think that Kirk Cousins, though, he strikes me as a type of guy that doesn't get pissed? Like, I'm sure he certainly doesn't like it, but he doesn't strike me as the type of guy that you're afraid of making him mad. Where you're
No,
like, this guy's going to be a vocal problem if we piss him off or whatever. I think you're just like, hey, he's like, oh, well, didn't see that coming. Life goes on type of thing.
no, because I think that he is looking to prove himself because he's now been in two places and that narrative still follows
But
him.
if you're 35 and still looking to prove yourself, like that tells you everything you need to know. And I'm a Kirk Cousins fan generally. Like I've generally been supportive of him. But if you're 35 and you still feel like you have something to prove, maybe it's just not in the cards.
Yeah, but imagine if you took a new job and then a week later they hired your potential replacement right afterwards. It's like, wait a minute, I just took this job and you're now all of a sudden you're hiring my replacement? Like, you'd be like,
sure,
what?
I get it, but hey, if you are who you think you are, you shouldn't be phased. There's plenty of evidence out there about Kirk Cousins and his abilities and where he struggled, and he's a very good quarterback. I think that he's a very high floor but low ceiling quarterback, and I think that he's pretty well maxed out, which again is great. Most people would take Kirk Cousins and what he's accomplished in the seasons he's put together. I just don't know that he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
We're going to
I just
find
don't
out.
think he has it. And not that every Super Bowl winning quarterback has it. I know that there are some, the Trent Dilfers of the world. But I don't know. He just doesn't seem to have that X factor that you need to be able. He can't do it by himself. For one, he's not that talented. I don't think that the Falcons have enough pieces around him to put him in a position to be that successful.
Yeah, we'll see. It's a cursed franchise, in my opinion, so I don't think it's going to work out. But my boy Sean Payton did a few things this week. First thing he did was trade for Zach Wilson, which insane. And heading into this draft, their quarterback room was Zach Wilson, Jarrett Stidham, and Ben DiNucci. And so you're right. So sitting at the number 12 position, you think they're probably going to take a quarterback, and they went for Bo Nix. And Bo Nix is kind of in the same boat as Michael Penix, in my opinion, in that he's older, been around for a while, and you kind of wonder if he's kind of nearing his ceiling. And this is another John Elway quarterback that they're going to have in here. And the only one that succeeded was Peyton Manning, and I don't even count that because it didn't take John Elway to make that pick. The Broncos are so bad.
They are terrible. At least in the last 20 years, no one has drafted the quarterback position worse than the Denver Broncos.
Or just evaluated it.
I mean, Tim Tebow might be the best drafted quarterback that they've had.
And he wasn't even that good.
I mean, no, he wasn't. That's my point. Like, I mean, some of these guys that they have drafted or that they've traded for, like I said, I'll give you Peyton Manning, obviously.
Doesn't count.
And then, sure. No, that's fair. And then even taking a flyer on Russell Wilson, like, I don't blame you. I'm not going to throw you under the bus for that either. But these draft picks, man, like, I don't know if this is a case of like the guy, he's trying to be he's trying to get too cute and think he knows something that other people don't know. But again, the proof is in the pudding, man. Like, you haven't drafted a quarterback worth a damn ever. So maybe it's time to like let somebody else take that over.
We're going to get a chance to see if Sean Payton is the genius that I don't think he is as he builds this franchise up, because he had Drew Brees and that made it a lot easier. And he says he sees a lot of Drew Brees in Bo Nix. And I'm like, that's
Jeez.
not even close. And I get what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to give your fan base some hopium, but the Broncos, oh my goodness. Zach Wilson, there's so much about what they're doing that I don't understand. And the Bo Nix thing, I mean, 6 quarterbacks were taken in the first round, I think, which is unprecedented. And the reason that that's happening is because the league has fundamentally changed to where quarterback is so important. Half of those guys would have gone in the second or third round easily, like a handful of years ago, but it is no longer that way. All right, so the last thing I want to mention, and the reason I'm mentioning this is because it is part of my stat of the week, is golf. And the Masters is always in April. I love the Masters. I was saddened to see that the ratings were down 20% from last year, which I don't really understand because pretty decent tournament this year. There were a lot of new names at the top, which is always what you want to see. But the name that stands above all was Scotty Scheffler again. And dude, this guy's having a 2-week stint in golf, which I wish that I could have just in anything that I do in life, where he wins the Masters. His wife is like 12 months pregnant at this point. She's going to have the baby at any point. And then he goes to the next tournament the next weekend and wins. So he wins 2 tournaments in a row, brings home some ungodly amount of money. And his wife still, at least as of last weekend, hadn't had the baby yet. And it's like, my goodness, what a week for Scotty Scheffler. And I feel like this guy he's only 28, even though I thought he was like 45 because of the beard. But I'm like, this guy is setting himself up to be the most consistent golfer. Like, nobody's going to be Tiger, nobody's going to be Jack, but this guy, I think when all is said and done, is going to be up there because he just consistently wins and plays so well, and he's a lot of fun to watch, in my opinion.
No, he certainly is. And was it 2 years ago? I felt like, he went on kind of a run like this where he won a few tournaments in a row. And it is fun to watch because I think that's good for the game. You mentioned viewership was down, but I think that's something that gets more eyes on it because you're going to get people that are going to tune in and see if Scotty can win again.
Yeah.
Just that alone. Or, and he seems like a likable guy, so I doubt you're getting too many people tuning in to try to watch him lose.
No.
But he's not really a villain by any means. But I feel like golf kind of lends itself to that. It's sort of like I think about like a baseball player, like a batter getting hot, going on a hit streak. I think that when you get it going good, it's good, and it's streaky though, because I think we've seen some other guys, not obviously to this level that Scotty's at, but we've seen other guys over the years that kind of go on these runs and are up there at the top for a while. And then it's just like golf's cruel in that way though, because golf giveth and golf taketh away real quick, and the margin for error between success and failure is just, it's inches and less than that really. And so what he's done is really impressive knowing that. And it's absolutely crazy to me that his wife still hasn't had the baby yet. Like, I think everyone thought that there was a decent chance he would have to tap out at the Masters to go to the birth.
Well, they did ask him about that. And he said that if it was Sunday and she was having the baby, he would leave. Even
as he should have.
I agree.
In my opinion.
And my wife was like, would you leave? And I'm like, if it was my first child, yes, 100%. And I was like, and probably for my second child, but I could understand if it wasn't your first child that maybe you'd, as a couple, rethink that. But my first, yeah, I would definitely leave. And she's like, well, isn't that kind of strange? And I'm like, keep in mind that he's got a green jacket already sitting somewhere. So this was not his first green jacket, but also, if it was his first, that's something that they'd probably talk about. And a lot of people would want to judge it or whatever, but I thought it was awesome and refreshing for him to say, like, yeah, I'm out of here. I don't care if I'm leading. I'm out. And of course, you have to think all the other golfers underneath him were like, please go into labor. Like, please, I just need to win this. But one thing about the Masters, I think I texted this to you, is whenever you see a lot of new names on the board, especially Thursday, Friday, and even Saturday, it's a great story, but there is something about turning over from Saturday to Sunday that fundamentally changes that golf course in a way that there's nothing tangible. It's the stakes that come with everything. And Scotty Scheffler, having been to the top of that mountain, he did exactly what he had to do. He didn't do anything bad. He made the players come to them, put the pressure on them. He knows all I got to really do is just continue to play and do what I've done. But when you're new on that board, you saw a lot of those guys struggle on Sunday. And isn't it funny how that golf course doesn't change from year to year, but good Lord, it eats golfers for breakfast, even some of the best.
It does. And like we mentioned, golf in general, like I said, the margin for error is so small. But then when you play on a course like that, that just increases that factor. The greens, right? The elevation changes on the greens and things like that, the pin locations, especially on Sunday, they make it extremely difficult by design, of course. And it really is, I think, the secret, and we saw this from Scotty on Sunday, is you're going to have a couple bad holes. You're going to hit a couple bad shots. You cannot let that get in your head. Like, you can't compound those mistakes. You just got to hang in there, because the chances are everyone else is going to make similar mistakes along the way. You just have to be the person that makes fewer mistakes. And I think that's what Sunday is in most cases, is you need to be the guy. You don't need to be the guy that hits the most great shots. You need to be the guy that makes the fewest mistakes, and to just limit. You're going to have a few of them, limit them, and move on, because you're going to have guys that are pressing, that are getting desperate. And I think if you just stay even keeled, play smart, you set yourself up for success. But having the experience of doing that in the past certainly helps, because we watched those other guys just crumbled.
Yeah, Jordan Spieth crumbled. He was a guy who, when he crumbled at Augusta, his career in a lot of ways kind of crumbled. Like, he kind of fell back to the pack a little bit, because I always say this, that if you're going to win one major in your entire life, it's Augusta. It's the Masters. You want that green jacket. It is such an exclusive club. But you talked about not making mistakes. I say this a lot. More times than not on a Sunday, I get more amped for when they save par than when they birdie a hole. Because when you're in the lead, saving par is what gets you the win. It's not the crazy flashy shots. I mean, sure, those do help along the way if it's a really tight battle, like Tiger Woods on 16 with that chip in, which is just incredible. Like, it's one of the greatest things ever. But saving par from 10 feet, 12 feet out, those are the things that get the pressure off of you, get you to the next hole, keep you moving. And those are the things that if you're a guy who's first time on the leaderboard on Sunday and you start your round off with a bogey, that compounds real quick. And that's, you said, golf is forgiving in that way. I mean, Tiger finished technically in last place, made the cut, but just got eaten up. And Tiger's in a different position after accidents and having his leg restructured and all that. But it just goes to show you that golf is unforgiving, even though people don't see it as a competitive sport. It's tough.
It is. And seeing what's happening with Tiger, I think, is the best illustration of how difficult golf is, because Tiger knows exactly how every shot should be hit. He is an absolute master, right? But you see the difference between when you physically can't do it, when you physically cannot, put the club on the ball in the fashion that it needs to be to get where you need to get it. You could have and that's the difference, right? I have no idea when I'm on the golf course. I mean, I'm just lucky if I hit the damn thing and it goes forward most of the time. So but he has every little bit of knowledge that you could want, every bit of experience and expertise to hit the perfect shot every time. And even when he was in his prime, he wasn't perfect all the time. And you see now that as those physical tools have started to deteriorate, you see it in his game, right? You see the struggle because he's not able to do the things with his body that he once could, or put the power behind the ball that he once could, or obviously probably doesn't have the hip mobility and things like that he once had to put different shots on the ball. And I think you can play golf at a high level longer than you can play most other sports, because it is not as physically demanding as the contact sports, but it does take its toll over time, especially when you've had the incidents that he said.
Yes, and I still think that the stat about Tiger that is the most crazy is the fact that they changed Augusta National to make it harder for him. And you can imagine how much harder that made it for everybody else. And like I said, I had a stat about this, so let's get to it. Iceman stat of the week. It's been a while since we've done that. I do love that music too. I feel like we've chosen good music for this podcast. What can I say? But I had a stat about Scotty Scheffler, and I know that you're ready, but are you ready?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is as of April 15th. So this does not include his winnings from this previous weekend's tournament. But based on the standard 10% cut for wins, Scotty Scheffler's caddy, whose name is Ted Scott, had already earned up until that point $1.2 million this year, which at that point would place him 54th out of 200 PGA Tour golfers, including guys like Victor Hovland and Ricky Fowler.
That's fantastic.
Isn't it?
That's insane, man. What a gig, right? But what a high pressure gig.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's, yeah, the golfer's got to make the shot, but it's real easy. I mean, we've seen it a few times, man, where you see a bad shot or something goes awry or they come up short and you see the caddy just get undressed on television by the golfer. And so that's a tough gig to have. And impressive, though. Good for him, man.
I know, right? Isn't it great? It's like if your dad, what does your daddy do? Oh, he's a caddy. But we also are millionaires because the golfer he caddies for is just incredible. But the caddy is, the opinion of the caddy matters more than I think sometimes the opinion of the golfer, because that caddy has to know every nook and cranny of every course, the wind, the weather, the direction of the greens, the whole placement, like so many factors. It's not like when I caddy where I just carried the bag and hoped to survive and get a good tip at the end. These two they're joined at the hip, which is why you see caddies a lot of times stay with the same golfer forever, especially if they've had success, or guys move on from a caddy. It's not just carrying a bag at the pros. You got to know a lot. And that's why if you win, you get a really handsome purse. So Scotty Scheffler's caddy, and then add on last weekend, he's got to be feeling so great. He's a millionaire just this year, and it's not even May yet. What a great gig, and congrats to him.
Yeah, congrats to both those guys, man. It's like having a producer, right, in the world of media, right? That they gather all the information, they do all the work behind the scenes, they tee it up for you, and then you just show up and execute, right? Where we are here, I should say you more than I, obviously, but we are caddying for ourselves. We're carrying our own bags here on Iceman and Coach.
And I get no tip after that, by the way. So there is no additional income that I get from carrying the production load during this show. Well, my man, I think it's been a good time. It's just about lunchtime for you. So everybody who is listening or watching on Central Time can go get some lunch and grab some food. And we still have a whole weekend left. But before we get out with the social media stuff, do you have anything you want to say to everybody?
No, just happy to be back. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully we won't have as long of a break until the next time that we do this. And happy spring, everybody.
Absolutely, my man. Happy spring with all the rain out here. And so Brad is right. We're going to try to be more consistent. But luckily, one of the things that we did about a year ago now is create the whole I&C thing where we can have different voices on different things. And so we've been able to bring in some new blood, especially with the subscriber bump that we've received lately. All the Bradley people that are coming in for Braves Talk hopefully are listening to some other stuff. So stick with us because, we've never been the super consistent type, but we want to bring you good stuff. So in my opinion, it's quality over quantity every time at every turn. And that's what we strive for here. Of course, if you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on TikTok, Twitter, or X, Facebook, all that good stuff. And of course, we're in audio, any podcast app that you have, Apple, Spotify. If you want to leave us a review, that'd be amazing. We haven't gotten one of those in a while. And support the Matty Ice Media Network for other shows. Like I do Fire Footwear, we have Political Football, and we're just trying to keep bringing you good content. Brad, it's always good to see that face. And for everybody that is in the I&C universe, I want to thank you for taking out the time. Any minute that you spend listening to our content is a minute well spent, and we appreciate every single second of your time. Hope this finds everybody well and safe. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you next time. This is Iceman and Coach. The opinions and viewpoints expressed on I&C Sports are those of Matt Freites, Brad Powell, and their guests, and not necessarily those of the Matty Ice Media Network. I&C Sports is exclusively owned by Matt Freites and Brad Powell and is brought to you by the Matty Ice Media Network.